And here we are, and a very, very warm welcome to our very special guest, a global soul steward of infinite repute. And to all you people who are tuning in, I can see Isabel. Hello, Isabel. And 1A Williams. Hi, Theresa and Stewart. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sure lots of people will be calling in the chat box. Can you see the chat box, Theresa?
No, I don't.
I don't know if that's something that's possible. Anyway, hello, Stacey, Marjorie. Yes, you see people are pouring in. Wonderful. Christian, who I don't know Christian. It looks as though it's a Norwegian name, so that's possibly somebody that Theresa knows. Let me introduce this wonderful lady that we have here, because we're extremely honored to have her part of this wonderful process of deep dialogues, which of course was given birth during the global pause when vibration was changing quite radically. And I was having these extraordinary conversations with people around the world, which I started recording. So this is Dr. Theresa Bullard, who is a physicist, an author, a speaker, an international teacher, and a change agent. Also, the host of the inimitable Mystery Teachings on Gaia TV. Throughout Theresa's spirit journey, she has discovered innovative ways to weave together her formal education as a PhD physicist with her deep training in the mystery school lineage, evolving a passion for bridging science and spirituality in a highly unique but very grounded way. Theresa has presented to live audiences globally, helping thousands and thousands of people to awaken their greater potential and in finding a deeper meaning and purpose in life, fusing modern day quantum physics with powerful time tested techniques for harnessing consciousness, particularly this time of the Great Shift. And Theresa brings a fresh and powerfully altering approach. Welcome.
Thank you. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to our deep dialogue.
Yeah, it's great, great, great fun to have you here. Therese and I met in the early part of September, I believe it was, at the Conscious Life Expo in London. Normally, the event is solely organized in Los Angeles, and I've attended for the last 5 years or so. And now this year, because of the uniqueness of the global transmission process, and of course, as we all know, we're all recovering from 18 months, nearly 2 years of a mass pandemic, and we met and immediately thought, connection. And so it's wonderful to have you here, my darling, absolutely wonderful. So we're calling our dialogue The Wonder of Coherence.
Mhm.
Perhaps you could open by just sharing with us a few thoughts of what you appreciate coherence to be.
Hmm. Well, coherence is, I think, just bringing everything into alignment if we were to keep it really simple. So as a physicist, we would define coherence to be laser-like, that everything is vibrating at the same frequency. It's all in phase with each other. It's all aligned. It's all directed in the same direction. So for us, bringing ourselves into a coherent state is an optimal state. It's where we can have mind, heart, body, soul, spirit, everything really aligned and in phase and in tune with each other. And that is, the optimal state that we really want to access for a shift in consciousness and being somebody who can also then go out into the world to resonate, and put that coherent frequency out into their environment and share that with whoever they interact with. And then that helps to entrain others into this, coherent state as well. And the light or the energy, the positive vibes spread from there. So that would be, a short
Beautiful.
synopsis. Yeah.
Well, it's a wonderful synthesis that you've given us. And so, am I right in saying, from your unique perception, that when we move into coherence, and principally the four bodies, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, are working in alignment, that obviously we know that the energy databases, the chakras begin to harmonize, and therefore we are moving into coherence. So as a result of this, we radiate a vibrational field, but automatically, I noticed that you use the word entrain. I'd love you to be able to explain that to us as well.
Sure.
That through the operation of that field, we open up waves that produce extraordinary coherence around us, bringing us into harmonic reaches, so to speak, where we're meeting the people that are in vibrational match with us, and indeed epicenters around the world, or major energetic nodes. And all, in other words, all we have to do is to move ourselves into coherence with due diligence and with devotion and with dedication, and automatically the universe begins speaking to us. Is that, would you align with that?
Yeah, I mean, when we tap into the pulse of the universe and come into that same vibration with it, then we're going to be receptive to what that is being communicated, what information is stored within it. Stewart, there was so much that you just said there. It's like I want to unpack all of it.
I was sort of giving you
Where do we even start? There is so much.
major detonating idea.
Yeah. Well, if we were to go to entrainment, for those who are not familiar with entrainment, it's this idea that if you have an oscillator, something that can vibrate at a particular frequency, and the way it was actually discovered was in, I don't know, 1600s. I don't know the exact date, but a clockmaker who was also very scientific in his way, he would set these pendulum clocks at the end of the day, and he'd set them all, and they all be kind of going at different rates. And then he'd go home for the night. And then when he came back in the morning, his name was Christian Huygens. When he came back in the morning, all the clocks would be tick-tocking together. And it'd be like, ooh, this is spooky. What's going on here, right? And then he started playing around with it and testing, well, how are they start off at different rates, but then the next morning they're all at the same rate. And what he discovered ultimately, or what he hypothesized, was that as the pendulum swings, it pushes the air molecules with it. And so in physics, we know today that any resonator, any oscillator will push the field around it as well, whether that be air molecules or electromagnetic field or whatever. And as it does, any other body that could potentially vibrate at the same frequency will receive that and respond to that, and in time they start to swing together or resonate and entrain together. So that's the principle of entrainment. Now, as you're saying, we have so many different frequencies that we can vibrate at. Each chakra has a different frequency. Our brain has multiple frequencies. Our heart has multiple frequencies. We are these oscillating vibrational beings, multidimensional, multi-vibrational beings. We have many modes at which we can vibrate at. So we can entrain into different rhythms. There's the rhythm of the sun, there's the rhythm of the moon, there's the rhythm of the universe, there's the rhythm of our relationships. And this entrainment process is more, it's like we can accomplish it more if we can achieve a coherent state. If we can't achieve a coherent state, there's all this static going on, and it's too much confusion. You don't know what to entrain into. But when we can bring ourselves and our environment and our relationships into coherence, now we can have a real effect in spreading that particular vibration.
Oh, brilliant. It's actually at the core of my work as a pro voice coach, meaning that, particularly in a chamber that I was fortunate enough to manage for many years, the reconstruction of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, which is this sacred geometry, all made of oak. And so it has this specific resonance, that when I could assist the great actor, because we all need to be conjured into our coherent field, particularly actors who are like pedigree racehorses. They're very sensitive and they often move off center, and then the ego takes place rather than coming back into the soulfulness of their own individual harmony. That when I moved them into coherence, and when they were actually then yielding into the expansity of the way that the breath works through the great thoughts of somebody like Shakespeare, where the thoughts are much longer and therefore the breaths are much longer than we use today. The interesting thing is that the further we go back in history, the literature that was written to be spoken, the thoughts get longer and longer and longer. So they evidently had more breath, therefore possibly were more in touch with the metaphysical, or indeed with the natural and the supernatural rhythms of our cosmos. So as soon as an actor would do this, the whole of the audience, 1,600 people, would be mesmerized. So I found this really fascinating. It's now 25 years ago or something when we first opened, and I've kept doing it ever since. So thank you. I'm so gleeful about the fact that we meet on those levels.
Yeah. Well, the voice has such a powerful ability to transmit those vibrations, right? And from my own studies in the mystery school tradition, we use voice a lot. I mean, they say one of the mystery teachings says that all magic or all manifestation is spoken. That we're taking intention or thought, giving it voice, which then creates the vibration that impresses itself upon our material field around us. And that, as we know through cymatics, for example, the sound moves the matter and it shapes the matter and it starts to create those blueprints for manifestation. And then what's also so important is not just, and I'm sure this is very much a part of the work that you do, but not just the voice and how good, they might be at their exercises of their breath and their vocal range and so forth, but also the energetic quality within them. How coherent are they within their spirit, within their soul, within their heart, and then expressing that with the voice and a well-trained voice, and then the power that can have.
That's the only way that the voice can be the effective instrument that it can be. And actually using the word instrument sounds as though it's something that's artificial or something on the outside. It's awakening soul. And, the great actor is nigh to, whether they have a spiritual discipline or awaken to the sensitivities of our consciousness or not. That generally speaking, that's what I meant by the sensitivity of them being rather like pedigree racehorses. They become so sensitive physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So some of the great ones that I've worked with, they sometimes move into profound altered states of consciousness because they move into a powerful coherence within, and then they emit the coherent field as they start being character, so that they're using themselves as transportation vehicles to shape shift into the beings that they're playing, so that they often move into altered states of consciousness, as I was saying. I mean, for example, one of these actors who I worked with many, many, many years ago when he first left a British conservatoire, he was playing Hamlet. And in an altered state of consciousness, he saw his own father's ghost on stage, not Hamlet's father, and freaked out, and actually has not been on a stage since. But he automatically moved into film work and became one of the greatest actors of the 20th century, and won 3 Oscars, purely and simply as a result of his level of entrainment. So sure. So they have to be, otherwise it just sounds because my work is not just about speech. It's about going really, really deep into the vibrational flow of the way that we can be. Elements of sound is at the core of creation.
I would imagine also that as an actor steps into their character, they're also stepping into the archetype.
Yeah.
And in the ancient spiritual traditions, this was a form of magic, it's archetype magic, or assuming the God form. They take on that character, that whatever that being is, and it becomes, they become it. It becomes a part of them, and then it can be transmitted through them in whatever role they're playing. And so there is magic in the theater. Although I would hope that our movie industry, our theater, it goes up and down, and some of the archetypes today are getting very muddled, and this is another way which our world is out of coherence, is the muddying of the waters and the lack of clarity around core archetypes that are really important as part of our human psyche. And so, coherence happens at so many different levels, from the quantum level all the way to, very practical human levels of the voice and the brain and the heart, to the spiritual levels. And total coherence would be to bring them all into that state of alignment.
Yeah. And I have a lot to share with you on that level, which I won't go into now because it's a segue. But what I discovered working in that very unique chamber that I just mentioned, and what the magic and the spelling of Shakespeare's language is all about, and how, for example, with a trained eye, because Francis Bacon, who I believe wrote the plays rather than William Shakespeare, was a Rosicrucian. He based all of the characters' development on the Tree of Life. And so we worked on the basic archetypes. And within Shakespeare, there are always principally 4 archetypes: the lover, the warrior, the sovereign, and the magician. And very interesting. Anyway, that's going on a huge segue over here. But I wanted to bring us back to the nature of coherence, because here we are defining coherence as being a harmonic field of reference. But of course, we know that our world is in a state of incoherence and disharmony. And I wonder if this is probably going to introduce very broad sweeps of our beautiful painting, our beautiful brushstrokes that we're using this evening as we paint these pictures. But I wonder if there was anything that you would like to share about the current incoherence and how we can all move the collective into a greater field of coherence.
Well, I think at the root of so much of that incoherence is separation. That there is so much separation happening in our world today, and the more we try to separate ourselves into even smaller and smaller and smaller special interest group, or social justice groups, or whatever it may be, the more we're creating more tension, more disharmony, more separation. And in order to come into coherence, we need to start finding where we align, where we unite, where we can agree, where we can focus on the positives versus focusing on the negatives. And what we focus on expands. What we bring our attention and our mind and our awareness to is going to amplify and expand. So if we want to create a more coherent state of being for our world, then we need to first create that within ourselves, right? Create inner peace, and then bring that coherent state of inner peace, joy, whatnot, into our lives. That's on us to do that, right? Nobody but us can create that for ourselves. And then from there, as we bring that into our environment, it will affect the people that we interact with. It will help raise them if they are open to receiving that. And then we bring that into our community. We bring that into, more and more and more, we spread that out. So rather than, all the separation that our world is going into, I mean, even just all the labels that people want to put onto things. And then, as you start labeling something, then we start making it the other, and then we start projecting our judgments onto it and making it bad. And, that further separates more. And then people are focusing so much on that negativity. So, we really need to shift towards, what do we appreciate? What are we grateful for? Where can we align? Where can we agree? And people get very hung up on the surface of things. And yet underneath, there's common core values of humanity that we can all unite around. And this is one of the things that I talk about in my book, The Game Changers, Social Alchemists in the 21st Century, is that, there are new demographics coming forward that they're not defined by age group or religion or gender or anything like that. They're defined by their core value system. And there's a new value system that's been emerging probably since the 60s, but it's gaining traction. It went from being just the 2% of people who aligned with those values to probably 30% of the population is now starting to align with some of these values of like sustainability and altruism and caring for the environment and forward thinking and so forth. And that's what we really need, is to look for the common value that's underneath, even though the way people express it or pursue it might be different. And I think we can start coming into greater coherence as we unite rather than divide.
It's beautiful. And I wonder if you could share with us a few behavioral observations or indeed techniques that we can use. I mean, I speak techniques. In other words, conscious awarenesses of what we can use behaviorally to not become reactionary on surface level, but instead to become actionary on response-worthy levels within our interior, so we don't become mesmerized by the surface difficulties and challenges that are happening and will go on happening, because, as we all know, a system of governing is going through its death throes, and therefore, one of I don't wish to sound grandiose, but one of the beautiful essences that arise out of deep dialogues is that we're really defining a new hierarchy of values, which, if you just touched on rather, are those wonderful soul testings that we always come to, rather like life buoys in troubled oceans. We reach out for them, and love and compassion and empathy and mercy and forgiveness and truth seem to be some of them. I wonder if you could just give us a few thoughts about what you're seeing behaviorally we need to do.
Well, a big one would be more time for spiritual practice, whether that's meditation, some form of ritual that feel, or energy energy exercises that bring you into a heightened state of vibration, doing it as naturally as you can, making it a part of your daily routine versus all the stuff that people tend to fill their day with, which numbs, which distracts, which creates, more dissonance. Bringing a spiritual practice in, whatever feels right for them as an individual. But personally, I do universal kind of approach to spirituality, ancient mystical, Western mystery tradition. I love Kabbalah. I love alchemy. I love hermetics. Those feel right to me, but I think each person needs to find their way. And but some form of spiritual practice, meditation, yoga, ritual, chanting, mantra work, whatever it may be, prayer work, and making it a part of your daily life. Because I feel that when we base our foundation in life on ourself as a spirit being, as some eternal being, some part of a greater whole, a greater unity, and we start our day with that versus starting our day with, oh, I'm physical, I got to get up, I got to shower, I got to eat, I got to drink my coffee, whatever it may be. When we start our day with reminding ourselves of our spiritual nature, that already establishes a coherent field. And this is one of the things that we work with very much as a first step in the mystery school tradition, which is, to hand down tools of empowerment to help people reestablish that foundation and reminding ourselves of who we are. Because the way that we become mesmerized is really by giving our power away or becoming so caught up in something outside of us or somebody else. Or some other storyline that's going on out there, the media or whatever it may be, and we're coming outside of ourselves. We're coming away from who we are. And so to really come into and maintain coherence within ourselves is very much about knowing, who am I at the core of me, not the personality, not the physicality, but that core eternal essence that is, as eternal as energy itself, which is neither created nor destroyed. It's only transformed from one form to another. And the more we get to know ourselves as that essence, the easier and easier it becomes to maintain that coherence within ourselves. And the more we tap into, we heal, we come to acceptance, we let go of the past, we, feel more aligned with our gifts and our purpose and our passion, and all of that just drives and flows through us, and then that others benefit from being in our presence, when we're in that state of being. So that would be, a first tip. And gratitude.
Amazing. I mean, you just developed this beautiful thesis, and there are lots and lots of wonderful people who are responding with great jubilation at all that you are saying. And what I'm going to do for those of you who can hear me, those of you who are present with us in this live transmission, please do feel free to pick up threads that we're casting into this beautiful web of the wonder of coherence and ask questions, rather than just, a lot of you are, ask questions. Behaviorally, this is so significant, isn't it? Because we know that when we move into the miracle mindedness of our divinity, we literally recognize that we are vessels of the divine, that we are children of God, that the cosmos is within us, that we are stars wrapped in skin, and that when we look into the wonder at the core of quantum physics, we notice that it's so beautifully ordered within its chaos. It's beautifully ordered. So we begin to recognize, at least my perception is, through many of the people that I've been either taught by or experiences that I've had in conversation, that we realize that the universe is a completely self-organizing, a completely self-correcting, just as the interior cellular universe of our being, so to speak, is also completely self-correcting. And within the field of quantum physics, I know I'm just suddenly casting the net wide, but within the field of quantum physics, is there something that we can lean into to readjust our behavioral crises that we may be feeling, as so many people did when they were feeling fearful of COVID?
Yeah. So in quantum physics, the first key really has to do with what quantum itself actually means. Quantum means that things are discrete, they're quantized. So rather than a line being a continuous thing, it's a bunch of little dots spaced really close together. And in the middle, in between those dots, is empty space. So when one of the things that we might talk about here from a quantum place also that relates to this gap is that when we want to excite to a higher vibrational state. So like an atom, when the electrons are going around the atom in their ground state, it's fairly inert. But when it excites into a higher vibrational state or a higher orbital state, there's some coherent energy that needs to come in. Then the electron actually, when it receives the proper amount of energy, it literally disappears and then reappears in the new orbital or that new excited state. And in between, where did it go? It's not like you could watch it jump from one orbit to another. It disappears. And in the midst is what they call a forbidden zone in quantum physics. But that forbidden zone is actually the quantum field. It's like it jumps into the quantum field. It disappears from our ability to observe it, but then it reappears in a new state. And in that quantum zone, it goes into this realm of infinite possibility. And in that realm of infinite possibility, then it could come out in multiple different ways. And so then we only know which way it comes out once we observe it, right? And that's where the observer effect comes in. So what I'm getting to here is, how do we get into that quantum zone? Because in that quantum zone is where we can then observe a new reality for ourselves, and we can make a quantum leap into like a parallel reality almost. And to get into that quantum zone, it is about the gap itself. It's about that empty space. And to move into the emptiness, it's the background that everything is painted upon. So in quantum physics, it is the quantum vacuum itself. It's the 0 point field. It's this, what the quantum vacuum 0 point field means is that if we were to take things to absolute zero temperature, there should be no energy there. But there's actually infinite amount of energy there, because the quantum field has this vast well in some other dimension, so to speak, that could be tapped into. And they say that within a 1 cubic centimeter of empty space in that quantum vacuum, if we were to tap into it, it's enough energy to boil all the oceans of the world. Is a lot of energy, right? So to move into that quantum space, silence, stillness, emptiness, going into nothingness. So of course, the key of meditation would be essential, tuning in, to the silence between the words or the sounds, this pause between the breath, this empty space between the objects. These backgrounds or these moments in between are what we want to start learning to tune into. And if you just think about it, if we tune into this, not the events themselves, but the space between the events, not the people themselves, but the field between them. And we stop focusing so much on object-oriented consciousness, and we start expanding into field consciousness, or that space of stillness and all potentiality. That's when we can make a huge shift. And when coherence comes into the quantum field, because to access the quantum field, we have to be in a coherent state. Coherence, like a laser, to focus in on what it is we're trying to manifest out. So we have to bring ourselves into that total being coherence to actually access that state. But it is possible. It is possible. It takes training, as I'm sure you've experienced just in your own, field with the voice and the soul and all of that. It takes that training, but
Yeah. That's a really beautiful description that you've given us. It's interesting that you were predicated by one or two. We have some very wonderful people who are commenting in the chat box. And somebody earlier on said, do you feel that the space between the sounds, that space of silence, is important? And here you are. So they were precognitive.
Good.
Here you are mentioning it.
Already tuned in.
So what Carlos is saying something really interesting. I just don't think anything is by chance. So we're talking about the potentiality. There it is. I just don't think anything is by chance. I feel there's a greater person in each potential existence. So really what we're talking about is the soul membrane, aren't we? That goes right back into that extraordinary field of consciousness that you were speaking of. Within the forbidden zone, within that space of nothingness, within the wisdom of uncertainty. As we let go of the doing, we detach, feel stillness, and observe, and we move into the silence of the stillness. I believe fundamentally that that's where the divine lives, where we are, as it were, charged with the beauty of this stillness to bring the stillness into action, to bring the divine into action. Hence the idea of, in the beginning was the sound, and the sound was made flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. That it's a means to really draw us into the very center of what the field of coherence is about, and gives import to the forbidden zone. And within that space, of course, feeling states arise, don't they? That are the quintessence of the experience, where we feel peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
We feel
Yeah.
good. We feel a sense of well-being.
Yeah. It's just beauty. It's joy. It's peace. It's just bliss. I want to stay here, and everything else falls away, and it's just be here now, and just be. And and that is a state of oneness. That experience of oneness with all. Some might call it that spiritual experience with this, the spirit and the union with that. And I agree with you that we are here in a way to be mediators between that divine state or that quantum state, whichever way we want to talk about it, and the physical world of action and manifestation. And we are the ones who can bridge that, because we have the capacity within us to alter our states of consciousness and to bridge into that field, and then have intentions that we want to bring forward and put into action here. And yet it's, like the law of attraction stuff. Yes, vibration, like attracts like in the spiritual level, opposites attract at a physical level, but we have to have coherence within our whole being for that power of intention to really work. And that still doesn't get us out of needing to take action, right? And this is where some of the law of attraction stuff falls short, because they get into pursuing it from an egoic place versus from a state of coherence. And then they think they can just sit there and meditate and the world's going to change around them, but they're not taking action. So we're the mediators. We are the ones who were put onto this dimension to follow those, the energy, the information, the impulses of the spirit, and then take action to manifest it here at this physical level. So we have an amazing opportunity, but most people get so caught up in this physical level that they forgot that they're supposed to bridge to the other higher dimensions and higher states of consciousness as well, so that can direct them versus the ego directing them. And if we want to talk about creating a world of peace and balance and greater coherence, if people were to just receive their flow of ideas and desires and thoughts from that higher state of consciousness of the spirit versus the ego that's so earthbound, it would change everything. It would change everything. So again, that spiritual practice is so key to basing our foundation on in life, so that it keeps reminding us, because the world has this uncanny ability to just pull us into the matrix and pull us out of our center. We have to work to, bring ourselves back into coherence, back into that center. And that is by our will, right? And by our behaviors or by our choices and practices.
And I'm fascinating. And I'm finding more and more and more that with the challenges that we perceive in the world and how the distortions, the dissonance often entrains us out of coherence, that if we can bring in the instrument of compassion and recognize that often the dissonance is created by a field of fear, not by a field of infinite possibility, that we can automatically bring about the reverberating consonances that bring coherence. I mean, for example, last evening, a group of us met online in a workshop called Entrainment, which I do around every full moon. Around every new moon is the Heart Spa, and we chant and we, provide sacred teachings and prayers and meditation, where we feel ourselves, although we're not seeing one another, we feel ourselves in a network of grace. We feel ourselves in a field of coherence that I then receive emails about 2-3 weeks afterwards from people saying, this is what's happened, this is what's happened, this is what's happened. If they can really see a way into the possibility of what that communion is all about, that crucible of grace. However, what I believe fundamentally that feeling is the language of the soul. And it's interesting what you were just sharing with us, because it was very much the crises that we found, or the challenge that we found at the beginning of this century, when, of course, the work of the great secret came forth, the secret. And of course, we know many of the great teachers, the leading edge teachers at that time, were stepping forward and talking about the law of attraction and the law of abundance and so forth, and how thought creates reality. And everybody started, thought creates reality, but then became completely confused within the egoic will.
Right.
And that's why Esther Hicks stepped away, because she said, well, literally, the teachings of Abraham are suggesting that it's about a field of consciousness, that is a field of vibrational possibility that leads us into infinite consciousness. And this is based on the way that we feel. So the question is that when you create something, the only way that we can really manifest it as in the likeness of the divine is if we're feeling the joy and the delight and the expansion of the adventure and the wonder of the love and the gratitude of what that is all about. So I feel that, that again, we're resting at this very interesting juncture where the time is slightly out of joint, which we know will be taking place because there are distortions within the space-time continuum. But at the same time, if we can reach into, well, how am I feeling as I greet the day, which last night appeared to be rather troubling. How do I feel? And what I'm discovering is that most people do not have a feeling literacy. I refer to it as being unremembered. We have a thinking consciousness, so we can actually talk about quantitative states. But if we want to move into the field of qualitative, that people have difficulty finding the words. We're moving away from superlatives.
Yeah, it's interesting because feeling can very much be a language of the soul, but we also have to be careful because, again, people, what do we mean by feelings here? People have different definitions of that. And some people say, well, I feel this, but it's just a subjective experience. It's not, and it could be coming from the pollution of the ego or their attachments or misconceptions of the self versus actually coming from the true core essence of who they are. So I think, again, it comes back to knowing thyself and knowing who am I at my core essence versus what parts of this are my ego that are coming in and distorting. Where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? And when we can really know ourselves at a deep level, then we can tune in to those deeper feelings of or expressions of the soul, versus the ego hijacking it and distorting it because of attachments and wounding and whatever it may be. And I think in our world today, people are very much basing their reactions and their perceptions of what's going on in the world and around them based on what they would call their feelings. But those feelings are very polluted by other ego attachments that are going on and unhealed wounds and so forth, that it's becoming very muddy, very muddy. And so I tend to define feelings as more actually sensations in the body.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Versus emotions of I'm sad today, I feel, giddy today, whatever that, the emotional state. Now the feeling can trigger the emotional state. The feeling can also trigger a desire, of the ego, but the feeling itself, that physical body sensation that is a signal that comes to us from the spirit, from the soul, those we need to learn to tune into. But to do that, it means becoming more empathic or becoming more aware of our empathicness. But we can't be numbing ourselves with drugs and alcohol and TV and distraction and all of these things, because it's going to be polluted again, right? Because your body just doesn't, it shuts down some of that ability to perceive those. So we have to clean up. And one of the things that I've experienced is, so we can go to, like a sound bath or to a group meditation experience, or be part of an intentional process with a group. And it will lift us. We can create that entrainment feel. We can create that resonance with the group. We can access these higher states that we might not access on our own. And that is a very real phenomenon. But then when we go home from that, do we sustain that? How long do we sustain that? What can we do to sustain it longer, right? So that we don't go home and then the matrix just drags us back down into the ego, but we go home and we are transformed from it. And one of the things that I've seen is that we have to sort of get the switches within our potential, because we have vast potential within us, but a lot of it is dormant. And so we're operating on maybe 2%, 10%, somewhere 10 to, or less percent of our full potential. And so it's when those higher energies come in, they're there and we might have a glimpse of them, but because we're not activated or reawakened in those potentials within ourselves, it's harder to sustain. So when we can turn on those switches again within our greater potential, then it's like plugging us back into the light where the source of that energy flows from. And then when we raise up to those higher vibrations, we know how to access it because we're more awakened to it within. We have greater connection to it from an inner plane. And so one of the things that we do in the mystery school is something called a life activation that really supports that awakening of that potential within us from spiritual blueprints, as well as, then affecting our physical life. And then having the tools that we can use in our daily life through various practices that keep our energy in a higher state, to really keep flowing that resonance, to become the person who drives and who establishes that resonance first thing, in our day, and then carrying that out into the world. And these are, some of the things that we do. So I like to see that people are empowered to walk away with the tools that they can use to actually sustain it in their lives, and, and then access those higher states for themselves versus always depending on somebody else to do it, or to help them get there. And, we can always use some help along the way, but we also want to be empowered to do it ourselves.
Yes, and there is a great movement, a great wave of consciousness, which is aware of personal sovereignty. Today, where we become the master mistresses of our own destiny, but at the same time, we know that we love to lean into coherence, and it's always great hearing what somebody else's opinion or feeling state is about what we're processing. The most important thing is to recognize that it's always a perception and that it doesn't necessarily mean it's accurate. The question is, does it serve one in the definition of one's own sovereignty? So we get this interesting point where we can use the lens of duality, because I was talking about feeling. I was talking about core essence feeling. I'm fundamentally talking about love.
Yeah.
Rather than the egoic demands of the emotional body, emotion, energy in motion, which is generally speaking reactive and is more to do with the pain body than to do with the bliss body. So I believe that we're moving into higher levels of consciousness. I mean, I was very affected 25 years ago by meeting a group of beings that announced that they were ultra-terrestrial, not extraterrestrial, who had once been in flesh but were not humanoid. Millennia ago, they stayed with me for 3 weeks and taught me about the principle of feeling is the language of the soul. And they said, no, what we want you to hear is this. Our lowest feeling state is something you call ecstasy or samadhi. This is the level of light vibration that we have reached. So that's the field of infinite potential that I'm really speaking about when I say that sound, we know, can draw corridors of light into the body, particularly through high harmonics, into the body, so that we experience the 0 point of stillness, that field of infinite potential, infinite possibility, that I believe is the essence of sustainability. It's just that the cerebral nature of the way that we think, blink, 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 blink. We're constantly switching on and off because of the way that light plays with the retina. Whereas if we become still and therefore focused, we can actually begin to give birth to the nature of what sustainability is all about. After all, we haven't really been taught this. We've been taught to remove ourselves from change and to find positions of permanency, which of course we know has just brought about static aspects of our beings, which is not about going into the field of infinite possibility. It just reduces us into, well, I better not do that. That's not right. Or whatever the terminology is. Any questions, anybody coming forth? What about symbols? Do they each have a sound? Absolutely. But I think we need to have something a little bit more specific. Ornella, any questions? Any questions? There are lots of descriptions. Anyway, back to where we were. Do ask specific questions, ladies and gentlemen, because we have an intelligent forum here.
I do like that question about the symbols and the sounds. Do like sacred geometries have sounds? If they haven't studied cymatics, with the CYMATICS, it shows how sound, vibrates across matter forms mandalas and sacred geometries. And, when you bring in multiple sounds, they're going to, move that materia. So they say that sacred geometry is frozen music. This was one of the quotes from the Pythagoreans. And that even the placement of this, the planets and the solar system is based on harmonics, and the same, as they rotate around the sun, they're making a sound that ultimately becomes the symphony of the universe, or the sounds of the planets. And even today, we know that this to be true, because NASA has done studies of receiving the energy that vibrates off of these planets, and has then translated that energy into audible sounds that we can hear. And it's amazing, actually, how the sounds that each planet makes matches its archetypal energy that we talk about in astrology.
Yeah.
Like if you listen to the sounds of Saturn, they're a little spooky. Whereas if you listen to the sounds of Mercury, it's very high and fast. And it's incredible, that these symbols archetypally of the zodiac, for example, have energy signatures that are captured in their symbol as well as in their sound. And yeah, I think that's true for probably every sacred geometry, every sigil, every symbol that was especially created through intelligence, like by the alchemists, by the Hermetics, by the people who really studied nature. They studied sound. They studied the all the ancient arts and sciences. They had a lot of purpose and reason behind why they created these symbols. Different from just an artistic kind of flow that creates an intuitive symbol that has an energy signature too, but that's more personal versus universal.
Yes, because all the great artists, particularly when we refer to the Italian Renaissance, they were all highly trained in all of these fields of reference.
Yeah, all
And,
initiates.
and fundamentally believed that they each had a guardian angel called a genie, and it was
Mm.
the genie that gave them genius.
Well, and
So
they
the
studied Hermetic.
inspirational flow.
So they also translated the Hermetica, like the Medicis had it translated, and they were embedding some of these ancient mystical teachings into their art that looks on the surface like Catholic art, but it's highly symbolic of deeper mystical teachings as well. So yeah.
But what's fascinating as we discuss this is that so many of these ancient mysteries that have been hidden sub rosa for hundreds of years are now emerging within our consciousness. So we're moving through a pathway of remembering.
Mm.
And of course, I'm reminded as you speak of cymatics of the work of Masaru Emoto with his miracles in water, because there he was doing the same thing. He noticed that when the thought is a living energy, when it's passed through water crystals, or indeed on surfaces of water, meaning moving water rather than crystalline water. And but if he actually chanted or spoke into it, the level of vibration was so much more acute. The level of specificity within the crystalline form was infinitely greater. And of course, we have the photographs that he's taken. A friend of mine who's a Reiki specialist has done the same thing with Reiki, has measured in laboratory conditions certain viscous forms, particularly pure oil and water and so forth and so forth, and has noticed that whenever he has resonated chi energy or key energy into the water or the form, that automatically it begins to take the most extraordinary form that is organic and representative of the field of animal, vegetable, and mineral, which I believe is what the ancient symbols were all about as well.
Yeah, the four kingdoms.
So if you were to, gosh, time is marching on. Any questions, anybody? If you were to give 3 principal tenets that you would like us to use to move us so that we could take our own disciplines and devotions into preparing a field of coherent resonance within us, what would they be?
Well, I think the first would be that stillness, really connecting in to that space of stillness and silence and peace within. And that is like the core of hitting that reset button, the zero, finding the 0 point. And there are multiple ways to get there, but some techniques are just tune in to the moments between, to the pause between the breath, and find that stillness. From the stillness comes forth all sound, or all movement, right? From the stillness comes forth the movement. From the silence comes forth the sound. From the empty space comes forth the objects that are going to be painted upon that space. So tune into that background first. Then the frequency of love, as you were mentioning before, as we bring in that frequency of love, that creates a very coherent state from the spirit through the soul to the body, starting with the heart as a major resonator. And even our DNA opens up with energies of gratitude and love. As we focus on those, it allows for our DNA to unwind its coil, to loosen up so that more of our DNA potential becomes accessible. And we really access this greater state of love and beauty and goodness. And then from there, bring that into your relationships, into your community, and focus on unity and what unites us rather than what divides us. Find the common ground rather than trying to label and separate and, become more and more isolated into smaller and smaller distinctions of groups. Try to unite. And if we can focus on those three things, creating that inner peace through the stillness, accessing that vibration of love, and then seeking unity in our relationships in our world, that will really bring us quite a far way to go.
Beautiful. I hope you're all writing notes, because you're chatting a lot in the chat box. I hope you've heard those beautiful, pristine words of wisdom. We have a fascinating question here, which probably is going to be our last point of reflection for this evening, because time has just marched on, which is interesting. Time is getting faster, isn't it?
Yes, it does.
This is from Susanna Medium. A question. I think there's a word missing. How does the information now received from the higher dimensional realities in the form of frequencies help humanity to navigate through our time and the challenges thereof?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that the veils are disappearing. There used to be only a certain range of frequencies or energies that were coming and illuminating human consciousness. But now these energies, higher and higher dimensions, are opening up to us, and those energies are flowing into our human collective consciousness. So as that veil thins, as those higher frequencies come in, what's interesting is that it's creating more light on the planet. Now, if you look around at the world today, it actually looks like there's more darkness in some ways, because there's just, fear and separation and some chaos happening. But actually, it's more light. That stuff was always there. It's just now being illuminated. Before, it was hiding out in the shadows. But as more light comes in from these higher dimensions, it can't hide in the shadows. So now it's going from this hidden, kind of suppressed state to this active, in your face state, because we have to face the shadow. We have to face some of those places within us where we have created the separation. So as we're coming into this time on the planet where we're having to face the shadow, and yet more light is coming in, hopefully we'll move past the mass distraction machine that the matrix world is trying to keep people bound in. Cut through that distraction, and you'll start to by bringing discernment. Really, discernment is key. And the more you come to know yourself and in your core essence, the more you can discern what is and isn't just a distraction from the matrix versus what really truly is aligned with a higher consciousness and higher spirit. And then as we, as we start facing through and letting go of our judgments and attachments and fears of the shadow, and coming to a place of accepting each other despite our differences. But when more light comes in, it means also that the hidden places within each of us that we haven't resolved yet, those also come to the surface. And I think over the last 2 years, it was so much of it that people, they couldn't contain it anymore, and they started acting out in protests all around the world, or violence and many ways of acting out. And that is the shadow within us that we were being asked to face during our global pause, so to speak, during the last 2 years of COVID. And for those who really took that time to take advantage of the slowdown and the time to reflect on oneself and move through it, then you probably have wanted to almost reinvent yourself through this process, because you'll see that there were things that I was doing that really, it's like, why was I even doing that, and is that really what I want to do going forward? And a lot of people are in this phase of reinventing themselves right now, which I think is good. But we don't want to get into laziness and inertia in that pause. We now need to move forward into, okay, what do you want to do that your soul calls you to, that your heart, your love is calling you to, you're passionate about, you're gifted at, you're good at, that that you can really look forward to, right? If we can all create a life for ourselves that we can get up every day and look forward to the day versus dreading the day or dragging our feet about the day, that's going to make for a much more exciting life, and people are going to be happier in general, and they're going to spread that. So yeah, as these higher dimensional energies come in, it illuminates more, but as it illuminates more, we have to do our inner work more to heal those places within us that were the shadow, accept, transform, transmute, move through it. And then we're going to move into a time where there is a lot more joy, a lot more light, a lot more people really being in their coherent self, in their true self, versus being in their egoic self. And yet it's, individual by individual. And then hopefully we can reach a critical mass of people doing that and create a collective spontaneous shift in the awakening of humanity.
Well, we're certainly going to be leaning into all of your amazing teachings, because you bring such beautiful clarity, light, and this crystalline frequency that moves all the way through you. It's the most exquisite diamond. So on behalf of all of the people, all these joyous people, many names that are very new to me, I want to say to you, thank you. I feel that everybody's clapping or doing this somewhere in cyberspace, in this infinite field of possibility that we call the psychic internet. And so, Dr. Theresa Bullard, I want to say thank you so much from the very core of me for coming on and sharing your wisdoms. It's been absolutely beautiful. And it's great to hear the articulation of such refined thought, because I personally find it invigorating, but it also begins to develop another conversation within me, which is not one of argument, but one of discernment, and becoming really specific in the associations that one builds up. One gets truer and truer and truer and more loving. So everybody out there, Alison, Patricia, Judy, Mike, so many people, Melanie, Colleen, Isabel, thank you, Melanie, I said Melanie, so many people, Mike, and there was somebody else, Jenna. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. All these wonderful people. Thank you. Hold this deep within your heart. Yes, get out of your heads and into your heart. And please practice these meditative concerns that Dr. Theresa has been talking about. Don't forget to go to Stewart Pearce channel and press like and subscribe. Theresa, is there anything that you would like people to be drawn to? So Ryan immediately puts up your website.
TheresaBullard.com. And mystery teachings. They can go check out mystery teachings on Gaia TV. And the Modern Mystery School is really at the core foundation of the work that I do. So they can find out more about that on my website, theresabullard.com, or they can go to the Modern Mystery School INT, which is international.com.
So it's the Modern or Modern Mystery School?
Modern Mystery School INT.com.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Get that, everybody. Don't worry. I'll put a note up on Facebook. Wonderful. Bless you. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week with another deep dialogue. And we have Janet Trelaw coming back on, and she is also going to be moving into mediumship and allowing Zach to speak. Bless you, Theresa. Thank you so much. Stay where you are, please.